So Fallout 76 isn't the best game. I think most of us that have played the game know that. Their review scores are bad, and even more recently it's made several lists for like the worst game of the year or just one of the most disappointing games of the year. But for me at least, I would really love to see at the end of 2019, Fallout 76 making the list for one of the most improved games of the year. Bethesda has certainly been taking steps in the right direction, although every time they take a step forward, it almost feels like they also take 2 steps backwards. But hey, at least if we just look at the past month, it certainly has been pretty positive, or at least mostly positive. But either way, in this video, what I actually want to look at are some of the things I would love to see come or be changed about Fallout 76. Since there's always issues around this thing, this is an opinion video. I am going to give you my opinion. Your opinion can be different, and probably should be different, at least somewhat. Over the past month or so, Bethesda has been posting their Inside the Vault articles, and in these actually detailed some of their DLC plans. In this video, I'll touch on several of these and actually speaking about ways I'm hopeful these are implemented. By the way, one of the first ones that's more ranty than anything else, and I just have to get it out of the way, is going to be the Atomic Shop. This one honestly doesn't really matter. It's a totally optional component of the game. It just honestly pains me to see how badly it's being handled, and seemingly it's getting worse with time. The Atomic Shop started by just being overpriced and reselling certain Fallout 4 items. Not something I agree with, but okay. But then it moved on to fake sales on items that were never truly on sale, just gave the illusion of being on sale so you were more inclined to buy it. And then finally now, most recently, we have $9 hairstyles that are only available for 1 day. Why is that? I don't really know. I kind of got the timed exclusivity with the holiday stuff, but with just some one-off hairstyle, it seems rather out of place. Again, all of this is totally optional. You can just outright ignore it if you want to. And even beyond that, you can actually earn atoms for free in the game. But I think one of the biggest issues facing this shop right now is simply the price. There are several things that are actually really cool in this that I would spend money on, but I almost don't out of protest because of how ridiculously overpriced things are. So I don't know the numbers. I'm not sure about the background as far as sales go on this shop, but I think if they slightly lowered the price on everything, or even half the price on everything, more people, myself included, would be inclined to buy it, and thus they would get more revenue. Maybe I'm totally offbeat. Again, they have the numbers. They probably have some professional working on this, but at least for me, it feels like for the everyday user, it's really not appealing to make purchases off of this shop, and I would really love to see that changed because there are some cool things in it. But next up, we have a much less controversial one, that with PvP. Bethesda has actually talked about this one, at least somewhat. They do mention that a new game mode that doesn't have PvP restrictions is coming in the future. I am genuinely curious as to what this is. They've only talked about it twice, one time saying, again, it's a mode without PvP restrictions, another time saying it's just a new PvP mode. In past interviews, Bethesda has actually touched on a 12 versus 12 PvP mode. This is all the way back at E3 though. This could very well be that. Obviously, they were thinking about something like it. Maybe it's Battle Royale. I think that would be hilarious, but honestly, I would welcome it. But either way, the way this is talked about, I don't think it's going to fully satisfy my problems with PvP. It's definitely, again, a welcome addition, but I think one of the fundamental issues with Fallout 76's PvP right now is it's simply too restrictive or abusable by players that want a PvP, even when you have 2 players that want a PvP. I think a potential solution to this is either creating separate zones or even separate servers where PvP is fully enabled. No bars, you can PvP freely with other people. Many games have this in zones where basically there's a wilderness zone that you actually can just outright PvP. If you want a PvP, you go there. Fallout 76 has this in theory with the hunter versus hunted radio, where basically you find another player that you're meant to hunt, but I've never had success with this. It requires 4 players to start, and the only time I've gotten those 4 players is when I was live streaming and I asked people on the server with me to actually join. I think really sectioning off PvP on separate servers as to one that has it fully enabled and one that doesn't have it at all will get the right players on those servers. You'll get people that do want a PvP, or even they'll just join that server when they want a PvP. It'll actually create that drama and stress that Bethesda talked about during some of their E3 press conferences, which I think is just totally missing right now. If somebody doesn't want to PvP with me, they can literally just ignore me and walk away, and that's kind of the end of it. Not really drama-filled if you ask me. Although this new game mode really does sound exciting, there are several PvP open game modes in the game already that don't really get used. One of the events on the northern side of the map technically does have PvP. I've played it before, but I rarely find players actually active in it. Hopefully this new one does have tangible rewards that make people want to play it, or even is just a cool new addition that a lot of people flock to. Either way, I think most of us can definitely agree that PvP needs a revamp. But speaking of those separate PvP servers, another thing I would really love to see added are private servers. They have said that modding and private servers along with it are coming at some point in 2019. Specifically, Pete Hines once said it'll probably be at earliest November of 2019, but I don't actually even mean modding. I understand Bethesda probably wants to push back modding because they want to continue to sell things on their Atomic Shop, and I respect that. Not really, I would rather modding than the Atomic Shop, but either way, I understand why they're doing it. Here, what I'm really talking about is just private servers. A server that I can either just set up or even pay to set up, change some of the values on it, and make it password protected or whitelisted so only certain people can join it. There are tons of other games that have systems like this, whether it be Battlefield, which I feel like is one of the most comparable examples. You could change several of the variables when you host servers for that game, or even many of the various Valve games that do have their own custom and private servers to go along with them. And I really think one of the best ways to implement this would be so certain restrictions are placed on what variables you can change. In other words, if I want to make it so I could one-shot every enemy on the server, I should be allowed to do that, but if you do that, you shouldn't be allowed to connect to other servers with that character. So there's certain private servers that you can just connect to freely and then go back to some of those public servers, but there's other ones that if you actually change some of the settings, you can't. You have to create a new character specific to that server. I think that's a really good way of implementing it, and as a result, you could see things like hardcore servers. You could turn off the PvP restrictions, make it so we do more damage to monsters and also to other players, or even role-playing servers popping up. That's something I would love to experience with a private community. I think if Fallout 76 had private servers right now, I would be live streaming it way more often just to play with all of you. But in reality, a lot of times when I want to play with viewers, 3 or 4 get to connect and the rest are stuck behind a loading screen because the server is full. Having 24 people all at the same time taking on the Scorchbeast Queen is something I want to experience, and this seems like a solution to that. Another thing Bethesda has mentioned they are adding are new quests and new events, and I feel like this will be cool either way. I'm excited for new content around this game, but there's some ways that could be done better than others. On one hand, you could have a new quest that's just added to the same old NPC that had another quest before. Maybe it's a new Brotherhood quest that's interesting and cool, and I'm sure a lot of people would enjoy, but it's just one quest and it just gives you a bit more backstory. Or alternatively, what if it's a totally new quest line? Several new quests added into a faction that was otherwise unexplored, like the Cult of the Mothman, a really interesting faction that doesn't have a lot going for it. I want to know more and it simply isn't there right now. Make it joinable, or even so you could summon the Mothman itself or some kind of modified version of the Mothman. There's so much potential with these new quests, and I just really hope they place them right. Place them in new and unique locations, flesh out some of those otherwise fairly desolate areas. But even with events, I feel like there's so much more potential. Many online games have server-wide events, specifically with MMOs. I think this is something that would be an amazing fit for Fallout 76. Let's say there's something along the lines of the Chinese reclamation of their secret base under Mama Dulce's. I actually talked about this in a previous video if you want to check out the full thing. Let's say the Chinese have sent a force of robots to try and reclaim Mama Dulce's. Maybe there's a new NPC added in with this, and then some of the existing ones are reused. If you don't know, there was a secret base under Mama Dulce's, that's why I chose this location, and maybe there's some secret plans that are held on one of the terminals here. You can either side with the Chinese, or alternatively one of the local factions that want to defend this. Let's say Modus is like, nope, we want those plans instead. Then there's an event with different stages that go on for a week or so. As you get to different stages, you unlock maybe new items. Things like the Chinese stealth suit or the Chinese assault rifle could be added, as well as new Enclave items if you choose Modus's side. And let's say in the end there's true consequence and changes to the map in itself. So if the Chinese are successful, they will reclaim this space and it'll actually be a place with Chinese traders where you can actually buy some of these new items. Or alternatively, if Modus and the Enclave are successful, it'll be an Enclave base now and you actually will have Enclave traders here. That's just one hypothetical, but I think events like this, where there's real consequence and lasting change to the map, could be really cool. This was present in previous Fallout games like blowing up the Institute or blowing up Megaton, where you had true choices, but of course with an always online Fallout like Fallout 76, it's not nearly as easily done because other players have to interact with that location. I wouldn't be shocked if an event like this gets a bunch of players to rejoin the game just to participate or to get some of those event exclusive items. But speaking of factions and events like this, another thing I would really love to see added are player-made factions. I feel like this is an idea with so much potential. Like let's say I could set up the JuiceHead faction. If you get a certain amount of members in your faction, you could actually set another faction as a rival and have no PvP restrictions. Maybe if you surpass 1,000 members in your faction, you could submit a custom flag design to Bethesda and they'll add added in game if you're a part of that faction. There's so many cool concepts around this, especially if you also have private servers. They have actually talked about this in the past as something they may add in at some point, but as one final note, something that will likely not be added but would be one of the coolest things to happen in this game is human NPCs. Especially if it's an event also. Let's say there's an event where the Brotherhood try and reclaim some of their former bases, and then following that you have Brotherhood soldiers that are humans around the world. I think that would be a really cool way to gradually implement humans into Fallout 76's map, and I think a lot of us would really like it. If they threw in dialogue choices too for some of those newly added quests, I think people would definitely start flocking back to this game. Either way, those are just some of my thoughts. I would actually love to hear what you guys think about all of this in the comments down below and what you want to see added. I really do hope Bethesda supports and continues to expand upon Fallout 76 in 2019. For those of us that are Fallout fans, we have a long wait before the next game, or at least it seems that way. It'd be pretty cool if Fallout 76 ends up being half decent, if it's a game that we can consistently come back to during this wait. As always again though, I thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed this one, and I hope to see you all next time. Later.